Has someone ever challenged you to something that they didn't know who are an expert at? I'm really good at archery. My friend and I rented him a bow at the local range and he wanted to bet me beers for every round. I told him repeatedly no, you will not win. He could probably get lucky if we did 1 arrow shoot-offs, but he wanted to do proper 3 arrow rounds. He insisted. I drank for free all night. A neighbor on my block in Brooklyn challenged me to a pizza bake-off. I recently catered pizza for my daughter's school and word got around the neighborhood my pizza was pretty darn good. My first thought was, this guy is a Brooklyn native. My pizza will be chic compared to his. But there was something about him bragging that I couldn't resist the challenge. He talked up how pizza was in his blood, how his dad ran the pizza place around the corner years ago. I remained silent and let my skills answer for themselves. I got a buddy to let us use one of Baker's Pride ovens at his restaurant. We even had total strangers try our pizzas. Every last person chose my pizza over his. I never mentioned to him that I've worked in pizza places almost every day for the last 30 years. I never mentioned that when I'm not working at a pizza place I'm making pizzas at home at least once every 2 days. I never mentioned that at 9 years old I knew that I wanted to be a pizza man. Here I am 45 and getting ready to start my own pizza business. Wasn't me. But there's a story about an old geotechnical engineer who used to work for the company I work for. Several senior staff had to attend a meeting with the client, and some government regulatory staff who were being awkward and not approving the design. This geotech guy is pretty much quiet the whole meeting. Throughout the discussion, the government guy keeps referencing this research document and shooting down anything anybody suggests. Near the end of the meeting, geotech asks government guy if he has the research paper with him. He responds yes and places it on the table. Geotech asks government guy who is the author of the paper, then slides over a business card. Turns out it's Geotech's own paper that government guy has been referencing to defend his argument. Government guy went bright red and apparently approved the design the same day. Similarly, when fluoridating the drinking water in my city came up for a city vote, an anti-fluoride guy and a retired dentist had a radio debate. The anti-fluoride guy is paid to go to affected communities and convince them fluoride is harmful. During the radio debate, he keeps referencing this one study. It concluded that fluoride is harmful in any concentration. After the umpteenth time the guy had brought up this study, the dentist said, you know, I've read that study. He said that actually there were 12 researchers on that study, and only one found anything harmful about fluoride. Those other 11 researchers actually all agreed his research was biased and he should be taken off the study, which he was. The study concluded that fluoride in drinking water concentrations is not harmful. The dentist said to the anti-fluoride guy and that one researcher, the one who got kicked out of the study, it was you. A local mall had a portable climbing wall with a make it to the top and win $100 side. The route was actually pretty challenging. As I walked by, the guy asked me if I'd like to try. Nobody has made it to the top. You think you can do it, buddy? At the time I was ranked top 12 climber in my age group and kind of laughed to myself. After taking my $100 I then proceeded to call the rest of my climbing team and one by one they went to the mall and claimed their $100. After the fourth person the guy got suspicious and took the sign down. We later told him we were all nationally ranked competition climbers and he got a good laugh. The company who owned the rentals was the one who lost the money. He just worked the booth and wasn't the one who lost the prize money. My landlord tried blaming me for damage to the kitchen cabinets but didn't know that I'm in construction and am very familiar with home building codes. They placed the cabinets too close to the stove and the glue that held the laminate had melted. When working as a teacher I beat a lot of students in Pokemon battles, cause they didn't think of me being like 15 years ahead of them in fighting experience. Noobs. I was a competitive swimmer for 14 years, including 4 years of NCAA, but I'm on the shorter side so people don't assume I was any good. Was at a friend's house on a lake one summer, and a macho guy challenged me to race a boy in the middle of the lake to prove something, I guess. The lake is deceptively large, about a half mile across, so I warned him that if he isn't a strong swimmer it could be dangerous. He was running out of gas after about 2 minutes, so I offered to let him off the hook, but he insisted he would finish. I went to the boy and was swimming back when I found him floundering, so I lifeguard swam him back to the house. His ego took a deserved hit that day. A Tinder date bet me dinner that I couldn't beat her in Smash. I've been playing competitively for around 6 years, so she ended up paying for dinner. My wife and I were taking an evening cruise for adults in Portsmouth Bay. The ship drove around the shipyard, where my submarine and several others were stationed. My wife and I are having a quiet drink when a really loud know-it-all starts spouting misinformation about each submarine we are driving by, calling them all the wrong class, wrong names, etc. When he literally points to my submarine and says, and that is a 637 class, my wife finally speaks up and says, actually that is a 688. The guy gets all gruff and says, well, how would you know? My wife smiles, hugs my arm and says sweetly, that's my husband's submarine. It is the Minneapolis St. Paul, SNN 708. He turned beet red while his date laughed. Not me, but my brother best friend. We were in Baltimore for a baseball weekend in 2009 and hanging out at a bar across from Camden Yards. They had a Silver Strike bowling video game. At our local bar back in Boston we had one as well. I'm decent at the game, but my brother and buddy were effing amazing at this game. Bowling 300 games and whatnot. So two dudes are playing this game and drinking. We ask them if we can play when they're done. They ask if we want to play them. We said sure. My brother and buddy destroy these guys, like it wasn't even close. These dudes said it was a fluke and they wanted a rematch, but this time for a round of beers. Again, Annihilation City, but they kept wanting to play, to eventually win a game. No lie. After 13 rounds of beers they finally gave up. They were great guys. We saw them the next day at the same bar and they walked up to us with beers in hand already and said rematch. To this day we still hang out with them whenever we go to Baltimore, and to this day, they have never won. I'm not a great swimmer, but there was a time when I would do laps for literally hours. I would go slowly to make sure that I had the energy to do the time I wanted to. This kid challenged me to race. I left him so far behind it was funny. He thought he was about to humiliate me in front of his friends. Non-swimmers who know nothing about technique are an absolute hoot to race. Beaten my fair share of buddies who are quick swimmers and didn't know I raced competitively and went to state finals. I refuse to get in most pools now, and so they think I'm scared to swim. I just hate the memories. My nephew challenged me to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate once. Super Smash nephews. Coworker, I'm pretty good at running. I run every day. I could probably beat you in a marathon. They didn't know I used to be a pro runner. Ran under 14 minutes in the 5k, sub 29 in the 10k, and under 15 hours for 100 miles on trails. Won a national title even. So I agreed to run with them and jumped in the local marathon with no training. I took the prize purse and made myself a few $100 and took everyone out for beers with it. Was an interesting next Monday at work. Just graduated as a teacher and I've been working as a casual relief teacher. I play lacrosse, which is a small sport already and even smaller here in Australia. I tried out for the last World Cup team and made it to the final cut. I was team teaching with another teacher who worked at the school. Before the period he spoke to me and said, hey mate, we are doing lacrosse today. It's a bit of an odd sport and hard to teach, so just wait over there and then you can just help with supervision and discipline. Then walked off. Being a CRT from an agency, didn't really know how to speak to him. Speak up. I tried to speak to him and say that I played, but he didn't give me a second, so I just listened and did my thing. Few minutes into the start of the lesson I grabbed a stick and ball and just started to work my around the class, giving them pointers and hints. The way he was teaching was completely incorrect and I didn't want to say anything, so when the kids broke off into groups, I kinda just taught them correctly. He pulled me over at a drinks break and asked how I knew so much, could perform the skills. I told him how I play lacrosse and my playing history. He asked why I didn't speak up and say anything, and I said I tried to tell him. Anyway, I ended up running the rest of the class and even ended up sitting down with him and going through the correct and easier way to teach the game and skills. Everyone thinks they are amazing at Mario Kart. They used to be good as a kid and think they still are. I played 2-4 hours every day in undergrad. A couple years ago, I raced in local and school tournaments and won most of the time. I was within seconds on several course records. I have every course memorized and know exactly when to brake on every turn. I don't play much anymore, but anytime somebody sees my Mario Kart painting, I won it at a local tournament, they tell me how amazing they are. I'm happy to absolutely destroy them. It's an otherwise useless skill. Went with a big group of college students to a bar. I was challenged by a cute little girl, and by that I mean she was maybe 95 pounds, 4 minutes, and 11 seconds to a drink contest with a pint of beer. I'm 6 feet 1 inches, 200 pounds, so I just chuckled and agreed to it. It seems like I had just enough time to tilt my head back to start chugging when I hear her empty glass hit the table. Turns out she had the ability to just open her throat and pour the beer down. We dated for about 6 months after that. Seriously. Chess. I'm a chess master. I think when people hear that they're like, oh, he's really good at chess. But what it means is that I've played in international tournaments and beaten other masters, and some governing body has given me a title. Anyway, I get challenged a lot by friends who think they're pretty good. What they don't realize is that your average pretty good player is getting destroyed by your average tournament player, and your average tournament player is getting destroyed by a master. Someone at a bar bet me there were only 30 days in a particular month. $20 if I could prove them wrong right then. Pre-cell phone days. I was born on the 31st of that month. Showed them my driver's license. Guitar Hero. That poor bastard didn't know what he was getting into. He suggested we play and was making joking comments about how he could totally beat me. We played on expert and I absolutely demolished him. My man was even struggling to hit the orange notes SMH. I was visiting Kyoto a couple years ago. I'm an American, and my wife and I walked into a tiny bar which had 5 people in suits laughing and talking in Japanese. We instantly knew that this was not a tourist bar and felt pretty out of place. The bartender spoke the most English, so I asked him what his favorite shochu was, and things got a little more comfortable as we drank and the whole bar tried to talk to us. Someone mentioned Mario Kart and I said yeah, so the bartender points to an old Super Famicom in the corner and apparently I have accepted the challenge. I smiled to myself and my wife thinks it's funny because I used to have some skill at this game. Bartender selects battle mode and the guy is effing phenomenal. I haven't played in a few years and he buries me in less than a minute. The whole bar is laughing and I'm a little stunned. We're on to the second of 3 rounds. I destroy him. 3 balloons to 0. Everyone cheers except the bartender. 2 shots were put in front of me and I throw one down. Round 3. We're down to 1 balloon each and I swear it's the longest battle round of all time. I'm sweating. Shell. Dodge. Shell. Dodge. I have him in my sights and I fire. I miss, the shell bounces off the wall and I self KO. The crowd goes wild. So that's the story of how a self-proclaimed Mario Kart expert embarrassed himself and his country in a small bar in Kyoto. We drank a lot and made a lot of great friends that night that we'll never see again. Not a physical challenge, but I sell building materials for a living. Think Home Depot but for guys that build skyscrapers and stadiums. There has been many occasions where an old man with zero construction knowledge tries to lecture me on what I do for a living. My dad was into video games before they were really a thing. He had a Magnavox Odyssey, Intellivision, etc. In the 80s you could rent Nintendos and games from video stores. He would do this when he visited and I would almost always smoke him at whatever game. I didn't see him that much, but he was visiting and decided to rent one in the game Double Dribble, old NES basketball game. It was pretty new at the time and he knew I didn't really like basketball. He played it all day while I was in school and when I got home he challenged me to a game. The look on his face when his 10-year-old son beat him by 20 points or so was priceless. My friends and I basically rented every game when it came out and I had played this one a lot. I mean, it's sports but it is still a video game. I was good at games. Karma time is now my teenagers can regularly beat me at just about anything. While not a pro, I'm pretty darn good at poker. The church I was at had a poker night and I was just going to watch. They insisted I join the 25-cent game. Came home with $200 and they decided to never have a poker night again. My office announced a laser tag team building event 2 weeks after I played in the laser tag Ultrazone National Championships, which were an actual thing in 1997. I had a mate that would play Call of Duty with me. I'd usually beat him in a 1v1 but he occasionally would maybe win or at least get close. But then we played a different game. MotorStorm Apocalypse. I was a legitimate top 10 player on that game with multiple number 1 time attack times etc, and he had just started playing through the offline mode and was winning the races, so he thought he was good. I warned him, but he insisted on a 1v one to show off his skills. 2 minutes later I'd lapped him on a 3-lap race and he's quit the race before he's finished due to the embarrassment of not being able to finish, because there's a 1-minute timer on the end of the race where anyone that hasn't finished doesn't get to finish. He never played that game again. We had a golf work outing and he challenged me at golf. Now I've played golf my whole life. I also played in high school and have played at public courses every year since. He did not know this. The first hole, he gets to witness a 200-yard drive down the middle. He tries to play it off like I got lucky, but no. Every hole after that was the same. He drank a lot after the first couple holes. He, to this day, refuses to say I won because we didn't keep a scorecard. My buddy was dismissing my advice to another friend about Overwatch because I don't play ranked at all. I did my placement games that day and ranked 3 full leagues above him, and have only risen since then. Mine's kind of dumb, but I think it still counts. At work I'm kind of the Google Sheets expert and I make lots of tools for different departments to use. Enter new guy who needed to collect, aggregate and display a bunch of data. My boss was like, send Wish a calendar invite so you can tell her what you want and she'll set it up for you. New guy was having none of that and insisted he was going to do it himself. Well, a week later, he finally has this shitty sheet that doesn't have half the information we need, and we have to have the numbers for the state by tomorrow. So my boss asks me to fix it and new guy is like, yeah, okay, that's not really possible. This is as good as it's going to get. 2 hours later, I send them both a fully functional and automated sheet that does everything we need, and we'll be able to use it indefinitely, which means next time, and every time, the stupid state report is due, it will already be done. New guy was like, I would have added that in if I'd had more time. It was my first weapons qualification with a National Guard unit I had just transferred to. A lot of NG soldiers only shoot a rifle once a year for qualification. A soldier in the platoon I took over was joking about how lieutenants are bad at basic soldier tasks, trying to get me worked up. He bet I couldn't shoot better than him. We're not supposed to bet, so I declined any wager, but I did accept the challenge. I hit 40 out of 40 like I always do. He hit the minimum, 23 out of 40. He basically bet I wouldn't qualify. I've worked in the firearms industry my whole civilian career and have focused on rifle and long range shooting as my main hobby and have shot competitively. His excuses were hilarious. His sight wasn't working. He couldn't get a good position, blah blah blah. I put him on a few details for being a poor sport. For reference, this is clay pigeon shooting, kinda known as trap in the south. Well, I'm from a rural area and not exactly super southern, so when I'd go to other trap fields to practice different conditions, there's always be a smartass or two try and place a bet with me. This is definitely an old money sport with some of the guns going upwards of $5,000. I had an old BT-100 that we got in a trade for lead shot and some cash on the side. While not cheap, it was still much lower than other people's guns and people would take that as me being a newbie. They'd learn pretty quick though, since the team I was on went to the nationals almost every year from 11 to 18. It was always funny because some would be good sports but others would throw an absolute fit. I saw a guy damage a 10,000p Razzie because someone else beat him before. Even funnier part is there was a guy from the county next to us who could blow us out of the water, and he always shot with an 870 pump from Walmart. Camped out for tickets to the Phantom Menace. Guy in a group behind me challenged everyone to Star Wars Trivial Pursuit for money. It got to my first turn and I ran the board and won without anyone else getting to go. I felt bad, so I didn't even take his money. He still accused me of having memorized the cards to cheat. Nope. Just seen the original trilogy dozens of times all my life. Kind of similar. I told a guy at work that I could play guitar. He didn't believe me and challenged me to learn and play minor swing in 2 weeks. Nailed it in the time frame. Performed it at work. I had only accepted to perform it to him. I'm a bit shy and don't like performing. But there were no meeting rooms free. Had to perform in front of the whole office. Not my idea of fun. It went well and they now believe I can play a bit. My college has a dedicated gaming room in its central building. There's TVs for people to plug whatever into and use. I went in one day and saw someone playing Guitar Hero. He was playing on expert, so he was decently good, but not perfect. I sat down, chatted him up, and eventually he challenged me. Pro face off on Through the Fire and Flames. Get more points than your opponent. I'm not perfect at TTFAF, but I figured what the hell, it'll be fun. Well, our fearless protagonist got a little too big for his boots on that one, because our man couldn't hit the intro. The higher your combo in GH, the more your score is multiplied, all the way up to 4x. If you don't hit the intro in TTFAF and can't keep your 4x through the fast strumming at the beginning, you're immediately behind somewhere in the echelon of 30k to 60k points. The solos didn't fare him much better. He blamed his gear. A buddy mine was at a concert in bad seats and started complaining about it via Twitter. All of a sudden the band starts reading some tweets and calls my friend up to sit on stage for a couple songs. They sit him at the piano and during the next song, they jokingly go okay piano solo. The crowd laughs for a second but then my buddy just starts jamming out as he plays piano in his band. Talk about dream moment getting to play with your favorite band. When I was around 10 there was an old man with Alzheimer's in my neighborhood who would often approach my friends and I. He would ask us questions that we obviously didn't know the answer to, such as what's the square root of 2, which was one of his favorites. One day I decided I'd memorize the square root of 2 to 20 digits. Sure enough he did ask me the question again and I was totally prepared. He was extremely impressed and of course he forgot who I was, so would continue to ask over and over again. Astronomer here. So if we were to just meet on the street, you probably wouldn't guess I was a scientist. I am a woman who enjoys dresses when the weather is nice. And this was doubly true when I was a few years younger, in my 20s and single, especially at bars. So at the end of college I was doing a summer internship in Mountain View, California, where if you went out there'd be a lot of Google boys who would literally sometimes wear Google shirts so you'd know they're extra obnoxious. I remember getting stuck chatting with one, and when he asked my major he sneered with the "do you really know the subject" attitude, and asked me if I knew how the Heisenberg uncertainty principle was. And when I explained his 20 questions, said it's probably not so hard because they go easy on women because they don't want to scare them off. Then he proceeded to tell me about a lecture he attended in Mountain View that he'd been lucky enough to visit, as a Google employee, by Jill Tarter, who runs the SETI Institute, and proceeded to tell me about the Allen telescope array they were building in Northern California because I might not know about it. I gave him a minute for his spiel but then said I actually was working for Jill that summer at the SETI Institute on interference mitigation for the Allen telescope array, and did he want to hear what she was really like, or see some pictures from the at a site? I'd also just met Frank Drake, and he was really nice. Oh man, was that guy not happy. But hey, at least he stopped talking to me like right after. People say all kinds of random how weather and climate functions. I'm a meteorologist in disguise, work as a data scientist but has a master's and a PhD in meteorology. When I politely and gently inform them how things actually work, people are usually super interested to know more. But occasionally I got something like, "Oh yeah, and how do you know?" Well, I have published several papers on the matter. Would love to discuss it all night. So far, they've all backed down after that. Some guy tried to hit on me by drawing me within a minute, while I was with my now husband, then boyfriend and best friend. We indulged him. I asked if I could do one in return and blew his out of the water. Then I introduced my boyfriend. He bowed out gracefully and we laughed and I was incredibly flattered. Really creative way to hit on someone, and I think we ended up buying him a beer.